My daughter-in-law spiked my drink to humiliate me. But what she didn't expect was that I would switch our glasses. The moment I watched her collapse unconscious at our family dinner table, I realized the depths of her cruelty went far beyond anything I had ever imagined. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share, and if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. The rain had been falling steadily that October evening in Queens, creating a gentle percussion against my fourth-floor apartment window. I could smell the damp asphalt mixed with the fading aroma of the chrysanthemums I had planted in my small windowsill garden. At 72, my daily routine had become a carefully orchestrated dance of survival. I would wake before sunrise, my arthritis greeting me with its familiar ache, and prepare a breakfast that I often ate alone while watching the morning news highlight all the problems I could never solve. My reflection in the hallway mirror showed a woman I barely recognized anymore. The vibrant woman who had once danced with my late husband Robert in our Brooklyn apartment seemed like a distant memory. My silver hair was always neat, my clothes always pressed, but my eyes carried the weight of years of disappointment and quiet desperation. That particular evening, I was standing in my small kitchen, stirring a pot of soup that would last me 3 days, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my son Marcus. "Family dinner at our place tomorrow night, Mom. Sarah wants to discuss something important with everyone. 7 o'clock. Sarah, my daughter-in-law of 15 years, the woman who had slowly but systematically turned my own son against me. I set down my wooden spoon and felt that familiar knot form in my stomach. These family dinners had become battlegrounds disguised as gatherings, where I was always the target and never the guest. I walked to my living room and picked up the framed photo of Marcus's wedding day. There I was, beaming with pride in my navy blue dress, standing next to my son who looked so handsome in his tuxedo. But even then, Sarah's smile had seemed forced when she looked at me. Her green eyes held a coldness that I had tried so hard to ignore, convincing myself it was just nerves about joining a new family. How wrong I had been. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Queens settling into sleep. The distant hum of traffic on the expressway, the occasional siren, the neighbors upstairs walking across their floor. I wondered what Sarah wanted to discuss. In my heart, I already knew it wouldn't be good news for me. It never was. The next morning, I took the subway into Manhattan to visit my doctor. Dr. Richardson had been treating me for the past 10 years, watching my blood pressure climb as my family's stress increased. His office was in a tall building near Central Park, and I always loved looking out at the trees from his waiting room. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, reviewing my chart during our appointment, "your stress levels are concerning me. Have you considered talking to someone about what's troubling you at home?" I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to explain how my own family had become strangers who only called when they needed something, how my daughter-in-law had gradually poisoned my relationship with my grandchildren, making me feel like an unwelcome visitor in their lives, how my life savings were slowly being drained by requests for loans that were never repaid. But instead, I just smiled and said, "Oh, doctor, you know how families can be. We all have our little disagreements." He looked at me with kind eyes that seemed to see right through my pretense. "Eleanor, you've been my patient for a long time. I can see you're carrying a heavy burden. You don't have to carry it alone." I left his office with a prescription for stronger blood pressure medication and a business card for a counselor specializing in family therapy. I folded the card carefully and put it in my purse, knowing I would probably never use it but somehow comforted by having it. The subway ride back to Queens gave me time to think about how I had gotten to this point. It hadn't happened overnight. It had been a slow erosion, like water wearing away stone. Each small slight, each dismissive comment, each time my opinions were ignored or my offers of help were declined with barely concealed irritation. I remembered the early years after Robert died, how Marcus would call me every day to check on me, how he would bring the kids over for Sunday dinners, and we would all crowd around my small dining table, laughing and sharing stories. Sarah would smile then, but even in those early days, I could feel her watching me, waiting for me to say or do something she could criticize later. The first real crack appeared when little Tommy, my grandson, was about 5 years old. He had scraped his knee at the playground, and I had cleaned it and put a bandage on it, singing him the same little song I used to sing to Marcus when he was hurt. Sarah had snatched Tommy away from me. Her face flushed with anger. "Don't baby him, Eleanor," she had snapped. "He needs to learn to be tough." I had been stunned by her tone, but I apologized anyway, not wanting to cause a scene. Marcus had looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. That was the moment I realized that keeping peace in this family would always be my responsibility, and my needs would always come second. Years passed, and the requests for money began. First, it was just $100 here and there. "Mom, we're a little short this month. Could you help us out?" Marcus would ask, and of course, I would say yes. I had Robert's life insurance money and our modest savings. What was money compared to family? But the requests grew larger and more frequent. $1,000 for Tommy's soccer equipment, $1,500 for Sarah's sister's wedding gift, $3,000 for a family vacation that I wasn't invited on. Each time, I would transfer the money from my dwindling accounts, and each time, the promises to pay me back grew more vague. "We'll get you back when Marcus gets his bonus," Sarah would say with a wave of her hand, as if my financial concerns were insignificant. But the bonuses came and went, and my money never returned. The worst part wasn't the money, though. It was the way I had become invisible in their lives. My 66th birthday passed without a phone call. When I fell and sprained my ankle, it took 3 days for someone to check on me, and only because I had to call Marcus myself. Christmas became obligatory visits where I felt like an outsider looking in at my own family's happiness. I started keeping a journal during this time, writing down the things that hurt me, hoping that seeing them on paper would help me make sense of the pain. The pages filled quickly with incidents that seemed small individually, but created a devastating pattern together. Today, Sarah rolled her eyes when I suggested we have Thanksgiving at my apartment like we used to, I wrote one evening. She said they didn't have time to travel to Queens for just dinner when they could have a better celebration at home. Marcus didn't say anything in my defense. Tommy asked if he could stay overnight with me next weekend, read another entry. I was so excited. I started planning activities we could do together, but Sarah said he was too busy with his friends and sports. When I offered to pick him up from his game and spend just a few hours together, she told me I was being clingy and guilt-tripping everyone. The word clingy became her favorite weapon against me. If I called too often, I was clingy. If I wanted to spend holidays together, I was clingy. If I expressed hurt over being excluded from family activities, I was being clingy and manipulative. I began to second-guess every interaction, every phone call, every text message. Was I really asking for too much? Was wanting to be part of my son's life really so unreasonable? The doubt crept in like poison, making me question my own perceptions and needs. My friend Ruth from the community center noticed the change in me. Ruth was a widow too, but she seemed to have found a way to maintain her dignity and joy despite her losses. She was originally from Jamaica but had lived in Brooklyn for over 40 years, and she had a way of speaking truth that cut through pretense. "Eleanor," she said to me one afternoon as we were leaving our weekly book club, "you're shrinking. Every week I see you, you're smaller, not physically but in your spirit. What's happening to you?" I wanted to tell her, but I was ashamed. How could I admit that my own family treated me like a burden? How could I explain that the people I loved most in the world seemed to barely tolerate my presence? "Oh, you know how it is, Ruth," I said, trying to sound casual. "Families are complicated." She stopped walking and turned to face me on the sidewalk. The late afternoon sun was shining through the trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the pavement between us. "Baby?" she said, using the endearment that always made me feel cared for. Complicated is disagreeing about politics or religion. What you're describing sounds like something else entirely. When was the last time someone in your family made you feel loved instead of tolerated? I couldn't answer her because I honestly couldn't remember. That realization hit me like a physical blow, making me gasp for breath right there on the sidewalk. The evening of the family dinner arrived gray and cold. I had spent the afternoon preparing, choosing my clothes carefully, practicing conversations in my head. I wore my best sweater, the burgundy one that Robert always said brought out the color in my eyes, and I carried an apple pie I had made from scratch, using my mother's recipe. The subway ride to Brooklyn felt longer than usual. I watched the familiar neighborhoods pass by through the rain-streaked windows, each station bringing me closer to what I somehow knew would be a confrontation. My hands were shaking slightly as I held my purse in the pie box, and I found myself taking deep, deliberate breaths to calm my nerves. Marcus and Sarah lived in a beautiful brownstone in Park Slope, the kind of house I had always dreamed Robert and I would own someday. The tree-lined street was quiet and elegant, with well-maintained stoops and gardens that spoke of prosperity and stability. I had helped them with the down payment, transferring $25,000 from my savings account without hesitation, when Marcus explained how much it would mean for the children to grow up in such a good neighborhood. As I climbed the familiar stone steps to their front door, I could hear laughter coming from inside. The sound should have made me happy, but instead, it filled me with dread. I knew that laughter would probably stop the moment I entered. Sarah answered the door wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she was dressed for a special occasion, which made me wonder if I had missed something important about tonight's dinner. "Eleanor," she said, her tone polite but cold. "You're right on time. Come in." The house smelled wonderful, like roasted chicken and fresh bread. The dining room was set with their good china and crystal glasses, the ones they had received as wedding gifts. Candles were lit on the table, and everything looked elegant and inviting. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe tonight would be different. Maybe Sarah had planned something nice for the family. Marcus came to greet me, giving me a quick hug that felt more obligatory than affectionate. "Hi, Mom. How was the trip over?" "Fine, sweetheart," I replied, handing him the pie. "I made apple pie with Grandma's recipe. I thought everyone might enjoy it." Sarah took the pie box from him without comment and disappeared into the kitchen. I heard her say something to someone else, but I couldn't make out the words. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a tray with glasses filled with what looked like fruit punch. "I made something special for tonight," she announced, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "A new recipe I found online. It's supposed to be very relaxing." The glasses were beautiful cut crystal, and the drink inside was a lovely pink color that reminded me of sunrise. Sarah handed one to each of us, Marcus, me, and herself. The children, I noticed, were not included in this special drink offering. "Where are Tommy and Lucy?" I asked, looking around for my grandchildren. "Upstairs doing homework," Marcus replied. "They'll come down for dinner in a little while." Something felt off about the whole situation, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Sarah was being more attentive than usual, making sure everyone had their drinks, encouraging us to try her special recipe. But her attention felt performative, like she was playing a role in a play where I didn't know my lines. "This is delicious," Marcus said after taking a sip. "What's in it?" "Oh, just fruit juices and a few special ingredients," Sarah replied mysteriously. "Family secrets, you know." I lifted my glass to take a sip, but something made me pause. Maybe it was the way Sarah was watching me so intently, or maybe it was the slight tremor in her hand as she held her own glass. Whatever it was, I set my glass back down on the coffee table. "Actually, I think I'll wait until we sit down for dinner," I said. You know how these medications affect me on an empty stomach. Sarah's face flickered with what looked like annoyance, but she quickly covered it with a smile. Of course, Eleanor. Here, let me just... She reached for my glass, as if to move it to a safer spot. But in her eagerness, she somehow managed to switch the position of our glasses. I watched this happen, but said nothing. Something told me to pay attention, to remember exactly where each glass was now positioned. We moved to the dining room, where a beautiful meal was laid out on the table. The roasted chicken was golden brown, surrounded by roasted vegetables that glistened with herbs and olive oil. There were mashed potatoes, green beans, and warm rolls that made my mouth water. It was the kind of meal that should have brought a family together in gratitude and love. But as we sat down, I could feel the tension in the room like electricity in the air before a thunderstorm. Sarah kept glancing at Marcus, and he kept shifting uncomfortably in his chair. They were communicating without words, the way couples do when they're planning something together. So, Eleanor, Sarah began as she served the chicken, Marcus and I wanted to talk to you about something important tonight. Here it comes, I thought. I picked up my glass, what I now realized was originally Sarah's glass, and took a small sip. The drink was sweet with a slightly bitter aftertaste that I couldn't identify. We've been thinking about the future, Marcus continued, not meeting my eyes. About what's best for everyone. I took another sip of the drink, noticing that Sarah was watching me intently while barely touching her own meal. My heart started beating faster, but I forced myself to remain calm. And we think, Sarah added, her voice taking on that saccharine tone she used when she was about to say something particularly hurtful, that you might be happier in a place where you can be around people your own age. You know, where you wouldn't have to worry about cooking for yourself or maintaining an apartment. The words hit me like ice water. They were talking about putting me in a nursing home. My hands trembled as I set down my fork. I don't understand, I said quietly. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I've been living independently for 12 years since your father died. But, Mom, Marcus said, finally looking at me with what I suspected was rehearsed concern, you're not getting any younger. What if something happens? What if you fall again and no one finds you for days? I realized this was a planned intervention, carefully orchestrated to make me feel like I had no choice but to agree. The special dinner, the formal setting, even the timing. Everything had been designed to corner me into compliance. And your finances, Sarah added with false sympathy. We know things have been tight for you. A nice assisted living facility would take care of all those worries. My finances were tight because I had been supporting them for years, but I doubted Sarah was going to acknowledge that inconvenient fact. I took another sip from my glass, noting that the bitter aftertaste was becoming more pronounced. Sarah was now watching me with barely concealed anticipation, as if she was waiting for something specific to happen. That's when it hit me. The special drink. The way she had insisted I try it. The way she had switched our glasses when I hesitated. My blood ran cold as I realized what was happening. Sarah had drugged my drink. She was planning to drug me, probably to make me appear confused or unstable, to support their case that I needed to be institutionalized. The cruelty of it took my breath away. My own daughter-in-law was willing to poison me to get what she wanted. But she had switched our glasses in her eagerness to make sure I drank it, which meant she was now consuming whatever she had intended for me. I continued to sip slowly from what was originally her glass, watching as she began to exhibit subtle signs of stress. Her cheeks were becoming flushed, and she kept touching her forehead as if she had a headache. Sarah, are you feeling all right? I asked with genuine concern, despite what I now suspected she had planned for me. I'm fine, she snapped, but her words were slightly slurred. Let's just focus on what's important here. Eleanor, we really think this is the best option for everyone. Marcus was looking back and forth between us, clearly confused by the dynamics he was witnessing. He had no idea what his wife had planned, which gave me some small comfort. At least my son wasn't actively trying to drug me. "What kind of facility are you thinking of?" I asked, playing along while watching Sarah's condition deteriorate. She was now having obvious difficulty concentrating, blinking rapidly and swaying slightly in her chair. Whatever she had put in that drink was beginning to take serious effect. "There's a lovely place in New Jersey," she said, her words becoming increasingly difficult to understand. "Very, very affordable. And they take Medicare." She was clearly struggling now, one hand gripping the edge of the table for support. Marcus was beginning to notice that something was seriously wrong with his wife. "Sarah, you look pale," he said, reaching for her arm. "Maybe you should lie down." I need," she tried to say, but her eyes were glazing over and her head was lolling to one side. "Sarah." Marcus jumped up from his chair as his wife suddenly slumped forward, her head barely missing her plate as she lost consciousness completely. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus was shaking her shoulders, trying to wake her up, while I sat perfectly still, understanding exactly what had just happened. "Mom, call 911!" Marcus shouted, but I remained seated, looking at the unconscious woman who had just tried to drug me. "In a moment," I said calmly. "First, I think you need to understand what just happened here." Marcus looked at me with wild eyes. "What are you talking about? My wife just collapsed. We need to get her to a hospital." I picked up Sarah's glass, the one she was supposed to drink from, and showed it to him. "Marcus, your wife drugged this drink. She intended for me to drink it, probably hoping I would become confused or incoherent so you would think I was incompetent." "That's crazy," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sarah wouldn't do something like that. She switched our glasses accidentally when I didn't drink it right away," I continued. "Whatever she put in here to make me look unstable, she just consumed herself." I could see the pieces clicking together in his mind, the special drink that only the adults were served. Sarah's insistence that I try it, her intense focus on watching me drink it, her strange behavior throughout the evening. "We need to search her purse," I said, standing up calmly. "I suspect we'll find whatever substance she used." Marcus stared at me for a long moment, then at his unconscious wife, then back at me. Slowly, he walked to the kitchen counter where Sarah had left her handbag. With trembling hands, he opened it and searched through the contents. His face went white as he pulled out a small bottle of prescription medication that clearly wasn't prescribed to Sarah. The label showed it was a powerful sedative, the kind that would make someone appear disoriented and confused. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what she was planning." I looked at my son, seeing him truly for the first time in years. He wasn't the manipulative partner in this scheme. He was another victim of Sarah's manipulation, just as I had been. She had been playing us against each other, making him believe I was becoming a burden while planning to orchestrate my downfall. "Call the ambulance," I told him gently. "She needs medical attention. And then we need to have a very long conversation about what's been happening in this family." As Marcus dialed 911, I picked up my phone and called Ruth. I needed someone I trusted to come and be a witness to what had just occurred. "Ruth," I said when she answered, "I need you to come to Brooklyn right away. Something terrible has happened, but I think it might also be the beginning of something better." The paramedics arrived within 10 minutes, and Sarah was rushed to the hospital. The sedative she had taken was powerful enough to require medical monitoring, but the doctors assured us she would recover fully. Marcus rode in the ambulance with her, leaving me alone in their house with my thoughts. I sat in their living room, surrounded by photos of the family I had tried so hard to be part of. But now I was seeing these images with new eyes. In how many of them did Sarah look genuinely happy to have me there? In how many was her smile real when she looked at me? Ruth arrived just as Marcus returned from the hospital. She took one look at my face and immediately understood that something life-changing had occurred. "They're keeping Sarah overnight for observation," Marcus told us, slumping into his armchair like a man who had aged 10 years in one evening. "The doctors say she'll be fine, but—" He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Mom, I am so sorry. I had no idea she was capable of something like this." "Tell me about the nursing home discussion," I said quietly. "Was that her idea?" He nodded miserably. "She's been talking about it for months, saying you were becoming too much of a burden, that you were calling too often and expecting too much from us. She said you were manipulating the kids with gifts and trying to make me feel guilty for not spending more time with you." Every word was like a knife in my heart, not because of the cruelty, but because I could see how skillfully Sarah had manipulated the narrative. She had taken my love for my family and twisted it into something ugly and burdensome. She had made my son see my affection as manipulation and my needs as unreasonable. "And the money?" I asked. Marcus looked ashamed. "She said you offered it freely, that you wanted to help, and that asking for it back would hurt your feelings. She said you got satisfaction from being needed financially." Ruth was listening to all of this with the expression of someone watching a masterclass in psychological abuse. "That woman," she said finally, "is dangerous, and I don't just mean the drugs." Over the next several hours, as we waited for news from the hospital, the full extent of Sarah's manipulation became clear. She had been systematically isolating me from my son and grandchildren while simultaneously bleeding me financially. Every request for money had been accompanied by subtle emotional blackmail, making me feel guilty for even thinking of saying no. Every excluded invitation had been explained as protecting me from being overwhelmed or bored. "She told me you didn't really enjoy family gatherings," Marcus admitted. "She said you only came out of obligation and that you'd be happier if we didn't pressure you to attend everything." I thought of all the birthdays and holidays I had spent alone, believing my family simply didn't want me there, when in reality, Sarah had been actively working to exclude me. "And the grandchildren?" I asked. "She said you were too old to keep up with them, that it wasn't fair to burden you with babysitting or activities. She convinced me that asking for your help was taking advantage of you." I realized that Sarah had been playing a long game, gradually eroding my place in the family while making everyone believe she was protecting both me and them. It was sophisticated psychological warfare disguised as consideration. The children, Tommy and Lucy, came downstairs around 10 o'clock, confused about why their mother wasn't there to tuck them in. Marcus had to explain that Mommy wasn't feeling well and was staying at the hospital overnight. "Can Grandma Eleanor read us a story?" Lucy asked, and my heart nearly broke at the simple request. When was the last time one of my grandchildren had asked me to do something with them? As I sat on Lucy's bed reading Charlotte's Web, with Tommy curled up next to me, I realized how much I had missed these moments. These children barely knew me, not because they didn't want to, but because they had been taught that I wasn't available or interested in being part of their lives. "Grandma," Tommy said sleepily, "how come you don't come over very much anymore?" "I don't know, sweetheart," I answered honestly, "but maybe that will change now." Ruth stayed with us until nearly midnight, helping me process what had happened and what it meant for my future. "Eleanor," she said as she prepared to leave, "you've been given a gift tonight. It's a terrible gift, wrapped in cruelty and betrayal. But it's still a gift. You now know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do with it?" That question kept me awake for most of the night. Sarah would recover from the drugs, and when she did, she would undoubtedly try to spin this situation to her advantage. She would probably claim it was an accident, or that I had somehow orchestrated the whole thing to make her look bad. She was skilled at manipulation, and wouldn't go down without a fight. But something fundamental had changed in me that evening. For the first time in years, I had seen my situation clearly, without the fog of doubt and self-blame that Sarah had cultivated. I had been a victim of financial and emotional abuse, and I had almost been the victim of something much worse. I thought about Dr. Richardson's business card, still folded in my purse. Maybe it was time to talk to someone professional about what I had experienced and how to move forward. I also thought about my finances and realized I needed to protect myself immediately. The next morning, Marcus drove me back to Queens, and during the ride, we had the most honest conversation we'd had in years. He was devastated by what he had discovered about his wife, but he was also committed to making things right with me. "Mom," he said as we sat in traffic on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, "I know I can't undo the years of hurt, but I want to try to rebuild our relationship. I want you to be part of our lives again. I want the kids to really know their grandmother." "What about Sarah?" I asked. "She's your wife and the mother of your children. I won't be the reason your marriage ends." He was quiet for a long time before answering. "I don't know if our marriage can survive this. What she did last night. That wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. And if she's been manipulating me for years about you, what else has she been lying about?" Back in my apartment, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and really looked around my home for the first time in months. It was a small place, but it was mine. The furniture had memories built into it. The photos on the walls told the story of a life lived fully, despite recent sorrows. The books on my shelves represented interests and curiosities that Sarah had made me feel ashamed of. I pulled out the business card Dr. Richardson had given me and dialed the number for the counselor. It was time to start healing from years of psychological abuse, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. "Dr. Martinez?" I said when the receptionist transferred my call. "My name is Eleanor Patterson, and I think I need help understanding what's been happening to me." That phone call was the beginning of my real recovery. Dr. Martinez specialized in elder abuse, and she helped me understand that what I had experienced was more common than I realized. Financial exploitation of elderly family members was a growing problem, and the psychological manipulation that often accompanied it could be devastating. "Eleanor," she told me during our first session, "you've been subjected to a systematic campaign designed to make you question your own worth and perception of reality. What happened with the drugged drink was just the most extreme example of a pattern that's been going on for years." She helped me see that my desire to be close to my family wasn't clingy or unreasonable. My financial generosity wasn't enabling or foolish. My hurt at being excluded wasn't oversensitive or dramatic. I had been responding normally to abnormal treatment. More importantly, she helped me understand that I had choices. I didn't have to accept being treated poorly just to maintain family relationships. I could set boundaries and demand respect, even if it meant some people would be uncomfortable with the changes. The first boundary I set was financial. I went to my bank and set up new accounts that required my explicit permission for any withdrawals. I informed Marcus that there would be no more loans or financial bailouts, regardless of the reason or urgency. When Sarah returned home from the hospital, she immediately went on the offensive, claiming that I had somehow drugged her to make her look bad. She told anyone who would listen that I was becoming mentally unstable and dangerous. She even suggested that I should be investigated for elder abuse of her, but the evidence told a different story. The prescription bottle found in her purse, the witnesses who had seen her switch our glasses, the timeline of events that clearly showed she had drugged herself accidentally. Her accusations fell on increasingly deaf ears as people realized the truth of what had happened. Marcus was caught in an impossible position, but to his credit, he stood by the facts rather than his wife's version of events. This led to increasingly intense fights between them, fights that the children couldn't help but overhear. "Daddy," Lucy asked me one afternoon when I was visiting, "why is Mommy so angry all the time now?" I realized that my presence was creating more stress for these innocent children, not less. As much as I wanted to be part of their lives, I couldn't be the source of constant conflict in their home. I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I told Marcus that I would step back from regular contact until he and Sarah resolved their marital issues. I would be available whenever he needed me, but I wouldn't be the wedge that split their family apart. "Mom, you have every right to be angry with her," Marcus said. "You don't have to protect her feelings." "I'm not protecting her feelings," I replied. "I'm protecting your children's emotional well-being, and I'm protecting my own peace of mind. I've learned that I can't control other people's choices, but I can control my own responses to them." This decision to step back wasn't about giving up or giving in. It was about choosing my battles and protecting my energy for the relationships and activities that truly nourished me. I began spending more time with Ruth and the friends I had made at the community center. I joined a watercolor painting class, something I had always wanted to try but never felt I had permission to pursue. I took day trips to museums in Manhattan, rediscovering the city I had lived near my entire life but rarely explored. On one particularly beautiful spring afternoon, Ruth and I were walking through Central Park after visiting the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, and families were everywhere enjoying picnics and outdoor games. "Look at you," Ruth said, smiling at me as we found a bench overlooking the reservoir. "You're glowing, Eleanor. You look 10 years younger than you did 6 months ago." She was right. I felt lighter, both physically and emotionally. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach was gone. I was sleeping better at night. I was even enjoying food again, taking time to cook meals I actually wanted to eat instead of just going through the motions of survival. I never realized how much energy I was spending on trying to make other people happy, I told her. Or how little energy I had left for my own happiness. "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm learning that my happiness is my responsibility, not my burden," I said. "And other people's happiness isn't my responsibility either." That evening, I returned to my apartment to find a message on my answering machine from Marcus. My heart immediately began racing, wondering if there was some emergency with the children. But when I played the message, his voice sounded calm. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to let you know that Sarah and I are getting divorced. She's moved in with her sister for now, and the kids and I are doing okay. When you're ready, we'd love to have you over for dinner. No agenda, no drama, just family time. I love you." I sat down at my kitchen table and cried. These weren't tears of sadness or relief exactly. They were tears of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. 3 weeks later, I did have dinner with Marcus and the children. It was a simple meal, takeout pizza and salad, but it was the most enjoyable family dinner I'd had in a decade. The children chattered about school and friends and showed me their artwork and school projects. Marcus asked about my painting classes and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "Grandma," Tommy said as I was getting ready to leave, "can you teach me to make apple pie like you used to make for Daddy when he was little?" "I would love that," I told him, and I meant it completely. As I rode the subway back to Queens that night, I reflected on how different this evening had felt from all the family gatherings of recent years. There was no tension in the air, no feeling that I was being tolerated rather than welcomed. The children were relaxed and affectionate in a way they had never been when Sarah was orchestrating our interactions. I understood now that Sarah's manipulation had affected everyone in the family, not just me. By controlling my access to Marcus and the children, she had also deprived them of a relationship with me. Her need to be the center of attention had required eliminating any competition, even from a grandmother who only wanted to love her family. But I also understood that I had played a role in allowing this to happen. My fear of conflict and desperate need to be loved had made me complicit in my own mistreatment. I had accepted unacceptable behavior because I was afraid that demanding better would cost me the relationships entirely. Dr. Martinez helped me see that this fear was not irrational. Sometimes, setting boundaries does cost relationships. Sometimes, people who have been exploiting our weaknesses will choose to walk away rather than treat us with respect. But she also helped me understand that relationships built on exploitation aren't really relationships at all. They're transactions disguised as love. "Eleanor," she said during one of our sessions, "you keep saying you were afraid of losing your family's love. But can you lose something you never actually had?" That question haunted me for weeks, forcing me to examine with brutal honesty what my relationships with Marcus and Sarah had actually been. Had they loved me, or had they loved what I could do for them? Had I been a valued family member, or had I been a useful resource to be managed and manipulated? The answer was painful but liberating. I had been living in a fantasy of loving family relationships, while the reality was far more transactional and conditional. The love I had been so desperate to preserve had largely existed only in my imagination. But here's what I didn't expect. Once I stopped desperately performing for love, I actually began to receive it. Marcus, freed from Sarah's influence and manipulation, began calling me regularly just to talk. The conversations were different now, more honest, more reciprocal. He asked about my life not out of dutiful obligation, but out of genuine curiosity and care. The children, no longer receiving subtle messages that Grandma was a burden or inconvenience, began calling me spontaneously to share exciting news or ask for help with homework. Tommy and I began having regular baking sessions, where he learned family recipes while I learned about his hopes and dreams. Lucy discovered that I had been an avid reader my entire life and began asking for book recommendations. We started a grandmother-granddaughter book club, reading the same books and discussing them over ice cream dates in Manhattan. These relationships felt completely different from the strained interactions of previous years. There was ease and naturalness to them that I had been missing without even realizing it. About 8 months after the dinner incident, I received an unexpected phone call from Sarah. She had been living with her sister in New Jersey since the separation, and according to Marcus, she was struggling with the reality of divorce and its financial implications. "Eleanor," she said, her voice smaller and less confident than I remembered. "I was wondering if we could talk. I know I made some mistakes, and I'd like to try to make things right." My first instinct was to hang up the phone. This woman had tried to drug me and had spent years systematically destroying my relationships with my family. But Dr. Martinez had been working with me on the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation, and I was curious to hear what Sarah had to say. We met at a coffee shop in Manhattan, neutral territory that felt safe to both of us. Sarah looked tired and older than I remembered. The confident, manipulative woman who had terrorized me for years seemed diminished and uncertain. "I want to apologize," she began, not meeting my eyes. "What I did that night with the drink? It was inexcusable. I was desperate and stupid, and I could have seriously hurt you." I waited for her to continue, not making it easier for her with reassuring words or quick forgiveness. "I know you probably won't believe this," she went on, "but I never intended for things to go as far as they did. At first, I was just jealous, I guess. Marcus talked about you constantly, about how wonderful you were, how much he missed his father, how worried he was about you being alone. I felt like I was competing with this perfect memory of his childhood. So you decided to tarnish that memory by turning him against me," I said calmly. She flinched at my directness. "I convinced myself that I was protecting our family, that you were too dependent on Marcus, that you were holding him back from building his own life. Every time he wanted to help you or spend time with you, I felt like he was choosing you over me and the kids." "And the money?" I asked. "That started as genuine need," she said, looking ashamed. "But when I saw how easily you gave it, how much you wanted to help, I guess it became addictive. Having that security, knowing we could always ask you for help when things got tight. I told myself you could afford it, that it made you feel useful." "What changed?" I asked. "Why are you telling me this now?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee absently. "Losing Marcus," she said finally. "Losing the kids most of the time, living with my sister and seeing how she treats our mother, with respect and gratitude instead of manipulation. I realized that I had destroyed something precious because I was too insecure to appreciate it. I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain and felt something I didn't expect. Pity. She had been so busy orchestrating and controlling that she had missed out on the genuine love and support that could have been hers if she had simply been honest and kind. "Sarah," I said, "I appreciate you apologizing. I really do. But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same person I was 8 months ago. I won't be returning to the old patterns of interaction, no matter how this situation with you and Marcus resolves." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean that I will not be giving anyone money to buy their affection. I will not be available to be treated poorly just to maintain family relationships. I will not accept being excluded, ignored, or manipulated, even by people I love." She looked stricken. "So, you're saying there's no way we can have a relationship?" "I'm saying that any relationship would have to be built on honesty and mutual respect," I replied. "And that will be true whether you and Marcus reconcile or not. My boundaries aren't punishment, Sarah. They're self-preservation." We parted that day with a kind of understanding, if not exactly forgiveness. Sarah was beginning her own journey of recognizing the damage her behavior had caused, and I was continuing mine of building a life based on self-respect rather than desperate people-pleasing. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Marcus was granted primary custody of the children, with Sarah having regular but supervised visitation. The financial settlement was complicated because so much of their marital assets had originally come from my loans, but I decided not to pursue repayment. That money was gone, and I had learned a valuable lesson about the cost of buying love. Instead, I focused on building genuine wealth in my life, wealth of relationships, experiences, and personal fulfillment. I took a photography class and began documenting the beauty I found in everyday New York life. I volunteered at a literacy center in Queens, helping other adults learn to read. I joined Ruth's church and found a spiritual community that nourished my soul without requiring anything in return. 1 year after the dinner incident, Marcus surprised me with a small party to celebrate what he called my Independence Day. He had invited Ruth, my friend from the painting class, my volunteering colleagues, and Dr. Martinez. The children had made decorations, and Lucy had written a poem about how proud she was of her grandmother's courage. "Mom," Marcus said in a short speech, "you taught me something important this year. You showed me that love isn't about sacrifice and martyrdom, it's about respect and genuine caring. You showed me that being family doesn't give anyone the right to treat someone else poorly. And you showed me that it's never too late to start over." I looked around the room at these people who genuinely cared about me, who enjoyed my company without wanting anything in return, who celebrated my happiness instead of exploiting my generosity. This was what I had been looking for my entire life without knowing how to find it. That night, as I sat in my apartment looking out at the lights of Manhattan in the distance, I thought about the woman I had been a year ago. Desperate, anxious, constantly walking on eggshells, measuring my worth by how useful I could be to other people. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been moments of profound loneliness as I learned to distinguish between being alone and being lonely. There had been moments of doubt when I wondered if I was being too harsh or demanding too much. There had been moments of grief as I mourned the family dynamics I had wanted but never actually had. But there had also been moments of pure joy as I discovered interests and abilities I had forgotten I possessed. Moments of deep satisfaction as I learned to say no to requests that didn't align with my values. Moments of profound peace as I stopped trying to control other people's opinions of me. I picked up my phone and called Ruth, something I never would have done in the past for fear of bothering someone. "Eleanor," she answered warmly. "How was your party?" "It was wonderful," I told her. But you know what the best part was? I realized that I wasn't performing for anyone's approval. I was just enjoying being with people who actually like me. Baby, Ruth laughed, using that endearment that always made me feel cherished. That's what normal relationships feel like. I'm so proud of you for figuring that out. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me had silver hair like mine and the same lines around her eyes. But there was something fundamentally different about her expression. She looked calm. She looked confident. She looked like someone who knew her own worth. 2 years have passed since that terrible and wonderful evening when Sarah accidentally drugged herself instead of me. The children are older now. Tommy is 12 and Lucy is 10. They spend every other weekend with me, not out of obligation, but because we genuinely enjoy each other's company. We cook together, explore museums, read books, and talk about life in ways that feel natural and unforced. Marcus has begun dating someone new, a kind woman named Patricia who works as a teacher in Manhattan. She treats me with the respect and warmth that should be standard in family relationships, but feels miraculous after years of Sarah's hostility. When I meet her for the first time, she brings me flowers and asks genuine questions about my life and interests. Marcus has told me so much about you, she says, and the way she says it makes me believe she has heard good things, not complaints about my neediness or interference. Sarah has also moved on, remarrying a man she met through her work. According to Marcus, she seems happier in this new relationship, perhaps because she learned something about herself from the destruction of our family. I genuinely hope this is true. I don't wish her ill, but I also don't wish her back in our lives. Dr. Martinez and I ended our regular sessions about 6 months ago, but I still call her occasionally when I need perspective on a particular situation. She helped me understand that healing from psychological abuse is an ongoing process, not a destination you reach and then stop working toward. Eleanor, she told me during our final session, you've given yourself the greatest gift possible. You've learned to distinguish between love and need, between kindness and enabling, between family loyalty and family dysfunction. Those are distinctions most people never make. Ruth and I remain close friends, and she has become something of a local legend for her ability to spot and counsel people trapped in manipulative relationships. She always credits our friendship with teaching her to recognize the signs earlier in other people. You showed me what it looks like when someone's spirit is being crushed slowly, she told me recently. Now, when I see that same look in other people's eyes, I know to ask more questions and listen more carefully. My painting has progressed to the point where I'm preparing for a small show at the community center. The paintings are mostly scenes from New York, the view from my apartment window at different times of day, the faces of people I've met in Central Park, the changing seasons in Queens. But the common thread through all of them is light. Even the darkest paintings have some source of illumination, some suggestion that dawn is coming. The photography I began has become another unexpected source of joy. I've been documenting the lives of elderly people in my neighborhood, creating a portrait series I'm calling Still Here, Still Vital. The faces in my photographs tell stories of resilience, wisdom, and continued growth. They remind me that aging doesn't have to mean diminishing. It can mean ripening. My financial situation has stabilized now that I'm no longer supporting other people's lifestyles. The money I had been spending on desperate attempts to buy love is now available for things that genuinely enrich my life. Art supplies, museum memberships, occasional trips to visit historical sites I've always wanted to see. Last month, I took my first solo trip in decades, traveling to Washington, D.C. to visit the museums and monuments I had only seen in photographs. Walking through the halls of the Smithsonian, I felt like a tourist in my own country, discovering treasures that had been there all along, but that I had never given myself permission to explore. On the train ride home, watching the landscape of New Jersey and New York pass by my window, I thought about the woman who had been so desperate for family connection that she would accept any treatment just to remain included. That woman felt like a character from a book I once read, rather than my former self. The holidays this year were different from any I've experienced in recent memory. Instead of anxiously preparing for gatherings where I would be tolerated rather than celebrated, I was genuinely excited about spending time with people who wanted to be with me. Thanksgiving was at Marcus and Patricia's new apartment in Brooklyn, a warm, comfortable space that feels like a real family home, rather than a showcase. The meal was collaborative. Everyone contributed something, and everyone helped with cleanup. Patricia asked me to teach her my mother's stuffing recipe, not out of mere politeness, but because she had tasted it at our previous gathering and genuinely wanted to learn. "Eleanor," she said as we worked together in the kitchen, "I hope you know how much Marcus loves you. He talks about you constantly. How proud he is of your art, how much he enjoys your conversations, how grateful he is that you've built such wonderful relationships with the children." Christmas was even better. Lucy and Tommy had saved their allowances to buy me art supplies, and their genuine excitement when I opened the gifts made me cry happy tears. Marcus gave me a subscription to an art magazine I had mentioned wanting to read, and Patricia gave me a beautiful scarf she had chosen because she thought the colors would look lovely with my silver hair. But the gift that meant the most came from Ruth. It was a small framed photograph she had taken of me at my art show, standing next to one of my paintings, smiling with genuine joy. In the photo, I look like someone who belongs exactly where she is. "This is how I see you," she had written on the back. "Proud, talented, and completely yourself." As I write this, I'm sitting in my apartment on a cold February morning, watching the snow fall over Queens and thinking about the incredible journey of the past 2 years. The apartment looks different now, brighter, more colorful, filled with my artwork and photographs and books that reflect my actual interests, rather than what I thought would impress other people. The phone rings occasionally with invitations to activities I genuinely want to participate in. My calendar has events marked that I'm looking forward to rather than dreading. My bank account has money in it that's mine to spend on my own priorities and pleasures. But the biggest change isn't visible in my surroundings or my schedule. It's in my relationship with myself. I no longer wake up each morning wondering how I can make other people happy with me. I wake up wondering what might bring me joy today, what I might learn, what beauty I might discover. I've learned that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's essential. When I was constantly sacrificing my own needs and wishes to placate other people, I had nothing genuine to offer anyone. I was running on empty, giving from a place of desperation rather than abundance. Now that I have taken care of my own emotional and financial well-being, the love I offer my family is healthier and more sustainable. I can enjoy Tommy's company without feeling desperate for his affection. I can have a disagreement with Marcus without fearing that it will end our relationship. I can appreciate Lucy's personality without needing her approval to feel worthwhile. The children have told me that they prefer this version of their grandmother. More relaxed, more fun, more present in conversations because I'm not constantly worried about saying the wrong thing. "Grandma," Tommy said to me recently, "you seem really happy now." "I am happy, sweetheart," I told him. "I learned that happiness is something you create for yourself, not something you wait for other people to give you." If I had a message for my younger self, or for anyone who recognizes their own story and mine, it would be this: you are worthy of respect and kindness simply because you exist. Your needs and feelings matter. Your happiness is not selfish. Your boundaries are not mean. Your worth is not determined by how useful you are to other people. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to demand better treatment. It's never too late to discover who you really are when you're not performing for other people's approval. The family relationships that survive your transformation will be the ones worth keeping. The ones that don't survive probably weren't real relationships in the first place, no matter how much you wanted them to be. Some people will call you selfish when you start taking care of yourself. Some will say you've changed in ways they don't like. Some will try to guilt you into returning to old patterns that served them but hurt you. Let them. Their discomfort with your growth says nothing about you and everything about what they were taking from you before. Healthy people want the people they love to be healthy and happy. Unhealthy people want the people they love to be useful and available. Choose relationships with people who celebrate your happiness rather than exploit your generosity. Choose people who respect your boundaries rather than test them. Choose people who see your worth rather than your utility. As I look out my window at the life bustling below on the streets of Queens, I feel profound gratitude for the journey that brought me here. Even the painful parts were necessary. Even Sarah's cruelty was a gift in disguise, because it forced me to wake up and see the truth about my situation. I think about that terrible evening when I watched her collapse from her own twisted plan, and I realize that in that moment, I was reborn. Not when she fell, but when I chose to remain calm and strong instead of falling apart. When I chose to seek the truth instead of making excuses. When I chose to protect myself instead of protecting the people who were hurting me. That night, I stopped being a victim and became a survivor. And then I became something even better. I became someone who thrives. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Have you ever found yourself giving and giving until you had nothing left? Have you ever wondered if the people you love actually love you back, or if they just love what you do for them? If any of this sounds familiar, please know that you're not alone, and it's not too late to change your story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences matter and might help someone else realize they're not alone in their struggle. And if my story has touched you in any way, please like this video and subscribe. Together, we can support each other in choosing dignity over desperation, self-respect over self-sacrifice, and genuine love over performed loyalty. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, perhaps in a way I hadn't been seen in years. Your attention and understanding have been a gift to my healing heart.